Hey everybody, it's Natalie from Champion of Coins Tarot, and this is just going to be a quick video about my reading list for the semester, both required reading for my syllabus and also some books that I am currently reading right now, just for fun, just for myself. And this video is for Annika from Nobody Here, because we have been having a conversation tonight about spiritual heritage and about spiritual tools. And I know that she's always asking me what's on my reading list, so I just wanted to do this real quick for her and for anybody else who wants to know what I'm up to this semester. So this semester I am taking a class on early Christianity, and it's a historically based class. So whereas last semester my class on Catholicism was taught from an insider's point of view, so to speak, in which we were reading through the catechism and we were reading books by Catholic theologians and kind of apologies, in a sense, for why Catholics believe what they believe. And of course, apologist is an apologist Christian literature. It's not like they're saying sorry, whether or not you think they should be saying sorry for some of the things that they believe in. It's basically just like a defense for why they believe what they believe and explaining different topics. So the book for that class is the Diarmaid, I don't know, MacCulloch, Christianity, the First 3,000 Years. And this book is almost 2,000 pages, and this is a fantastic historical resource for the early church. Like, this book is absolutely amazing. So it goes through, and it starts off with an introduction to Greek philosophy and to Roman philosophy. It talks a little bit about ancient Judaism and some biblical prophecies. Of course, it goes through the history of the temple system and things like that, and really sets the stage for what life would have been like in Palestine and Israel during the contemporary time of Christ. And then it has a really huge focus on the early church and how Christian doctrine was developed. And so you have the Pauline epistles written by the Apostle Paul. You have the apocalyptic texts, you have how the canon, how the creed is organized. You have a lot of debates between different philosophers about Gnostic literature and about different concepts of things like the Trinity, things like the virgin birth and the Immaculate Conception, and how that came about. And then the rest of the book, after like those first 200 and so pages, the rest of the book is dedicated to the history of Christianity in different countries and how the church allied itself with different empires, with different forms of government, different branches of Christianity that developed. So it talks about the divide between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox churches. It talks, of course, about the Protestant Reformation, and it goes on about modern-day cultural revolutions and counter-revolutions and how Christian philosophy has had to deal with that. So this book is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a great, I would say it's pretty non-biased. The author, he is very funny, so it's not like it's a very dry or very heavy read. He does put some humor in there, and he also talks a lot about the personality of the philosophers in question that he goes through. So this, I'm going to have to read this entire thing by April, so that's going to be interesting. But yeah, so this is the book for that class. And then the other religious studies class that I'm taking is about Sufism, and I'm so excited because one of my main focus areas for my academic career path is on mysticism in global religion and finding that kind of esoteric, individualized, experiential practice. And Sufism is that equivalent for the religion of Islam. And so we have Sufism by William C. Chittick. It's very academic. It's kind of repetitive. It bills itself as a beginner's guide, but I don't know. It's interesting. It's not my favorite by far, but it does give a good overview of what Sufi practice is like. And Chittick is a religious studies professor. I don't know what school he's in because I have a huge rental reminder on the back cover, but he's written 25 books on this subject. It's what he specialized in, so he really does know his stuff. And so even though it's not a very exciting read because it is a textbook, it is a very informational one, and so it would be worth it for any of you who want to try. And then we have the Masnavi by Rumi. This is the Oxford University Press edition, and this is just, I think it's, let me see. Yeah, so this is a book that Rumi wrote for his own Sufi order, and so it contains a prose introduction. It contains a lot of his poems and a lot of his sayings, and so this was, again, written for his religious community, and it has been translated into English by Oxford University Press. We have The Conference of the Birds by Farid Attar. And this is a 12th century mystical poem, and it's a metaphor for different ways that one can travel to God. And then the last one is Sufi Commentaries on the Qur'an and Classical Islam by Kristin, Zahra Sands. And this book, it kind of does what it says on the tin. This one is also very academic. Much drier and less accessible than obviously the poetry would be, but it does talk about how Sufi philosophers and practitioners have interpreted the Quran over time, and a lot of people, there's a lot of like scholarly debate about how much Sufism has drawn off of Islam and how much was born out of the historic Islamic tradition and how much is cultural syncretism. And my professor and the authors of this textbook, they all know each other, and they are all of the same opinion that Sufism is organic to Islam, and that to understand Sufism, you have to look at it from a historically Islamic context, and then view cultural syncretism as a secondary aspect. So that's kind of the direction, that's kind of the bias in these academic texts, but they are very good reads, and I'm really, really eager to read more Rumi, to read what kind of advice and what kind of instructions he had for his order and things like that. And then this is not related to religious studies, but this is the other class that I am taking, and it is Russian literature, and it's focused on Nikolai Gogol. So we're going to be reading Gogol's autobiography by the author Vladimir Nabokov. We're reading the collected tales of Nikolai Gogol. So this has his Ukrainian tales and his St. Petersburg tales in it, from his short story collections that he published at like the two halves of his career, basically. And what I love about Gogol is that he has so much religious imagery. The devil is a very prominent character in a lot of his stories, where people, they take the devil's name in vain, and then all of a sudden he appears and he messes with them. There's a lot of traditional Slavic and a lot of just folk elements in there as well. A lot of characters are ghosts, witches, or goblins, so there's just a very strong magic that is woven into Gogol's works, and it's just hilarious to read, I think. So yeah, I really like that. And then we're also going to be reading Dead Souls, which is Gogol's novel, which the first half is complete, the second half, like, he burned the ending of it, so this is kind of like a translator's guide to trying to piece back together some of the missing things from the document. But this is about a man who he goes and he collects the souls of dead people to work for him, and he may or may not be the devil. And then the last one is one of Gogol's plays, which is called The Inspector General, and it is a political satire about corruption in the Russian government during the 19th century. So yes, there's those. And then the other books that I wanted to talk about real quick that I thought might be of some interest. I'm not reading these particularly for any class, although one of them is related to the work that I did last semester. So last semester I wrote a research paper on the sociological purpose, basically, of the Shabbat meal in Judaism. And this book, The Sabbath, by Abraham Joshua Heschel, is absolutely incredible. It talks about how Judaism views time and space, and it's a beautiful explanation for what is happening metaphysically during a Shabbat meal and during that 24-hour period. And there's some beautiful biblical commentary. There's just, Heschel is such a brilliant, brilliant author, and I've marked this all the way up, and I really love it to death. So if you're interested in either Jewish ritual or if you're interested in learning more about Jewish theology, then I would definitely recommend this book. This is really foundational, and I've been meaning to read a lot more of Heschel's work. I've purchased books, I've gifted them to some friends that I know who would appreciate them. One of my best friends from high school is converting to Judaism right now, and so I've had a lot of great discussions about Heschel's work with her. But he's one of the most important philosophers and theologians of the 20th century, and he's just a beautiful, beautiful writer. So I feel like there's a lot that anyone who's interested in religion or anyone who's interested in spirituality could learn from him and from Judaism. Then I'm reading Purity of Heart is to Will One Thing by Soren Kierkegaard. I love Kierkegaard. I'm almost done with this book, and in this one, he discusses different aspects of living, particularly the responsibility of single-minded spiritual seeking and ethical integrity, offering clues to the nature of the good while insisting that each reader must work this out for themselves. And basically in this book, he's talking about how to find the good, or how to live in a state of mindfulness and in a state of unity with the divine. And he calls the divine or the eternal here in the book as the good. And he talks about different ways that people try to seek out the good. He talks about how our conscious and how our subconscious mind work, and how, basically he makes the argument that people want to reconnect with God, and people understand that there is a deeper reality than what is in the material world, but that people get distracted, or people are double-minded, and that they feel like there is a conflict of interest, so to speak, between what they want and what the divine wants for them. Basically, you have people who they might be on a religious path, and it's not really because they want to reunite with God, it's because they're scared of going to hell and they don't want to be punished. Or you have people who are spiritual seekers and they want to be famous and they want a lot of attention and glory, and they aren't doing it in order to reunite with God. They're just doing it to get earthly rewards and things like that. And then he also acknowledges how suffering and how mental illness can play into that, and that people they want to reunite with God, but then they aren't able to go all the way to enlightenment because they feel like they're not worthy of it, and they talk themselves out of doing it. So it's really good, and I love Kierkegaard. He's a philosopher who At the time, he wasn't, of course, like psychologically diagnosed with anything, but he did identify as somebody who's depressed, and he talked a lot about feeling melancholy. That's the particular word that he used for it. He said that he felt like he had a lot of anxiety and a lot of melancholy, and a lot of his philosophical writings are about how to live and how to pursue a fulfilling spiritual life while having a mental illness, as we now understand it. So it's just really great. I love everything that he's ever written, and this book is really great. And the last one is Suffering by Dorothee Soelle, and I mean, this book, obviously you can tell why I was drawn to it. But this is a critique of Christian theology and how it handles the question of suffering. And she talks about how there are different ways of looking at suffering as being punishment for sin, and that if you're a person who's experiencing pain in your life, then it's just karma, and you must have done something really bad to deserve it. A romantic view of suffering in which people are like, oh, you should strive to suffer, and you shouldn't complain about having suffering because like that's your goal. Like you want to suffer. Being a Christian makes you want to suffer and all this stuff. Talks about apathy, where people feel like, oh, well, I want to focus on God and on Jesus Christ and on praying, and if I do that, then I'm not going to suffer anymore in the afterlife, and that's more important than fixing suffering here. And so it creates this state of apathy where you're so focused on the next life that you don't focus on solving suffering where you are. And so she goes through, and she doesn't, at least I'm not there yet, but she doesn't really offer a solution, because she admits, she's like, I'm not a Christian theologian. I am just a religious studies scholar, and this is a trend that I've seen, and it's up to the Christian community to figure out how they are going to address their view of suffering, so that way they are not hurting and they are not ostracizing marginalized people. So that is a look at the books that I am going to be reading this semester for my religious studies major, and a few personal picks that have really stood out to me in the past couple of months. Let me know if you're interested in any of them, and I'll get back to you with some more of my thoughts as the season progresses. And again, shout out to Annika for getting me to finally make this video. I really, really appreciate it. So I'm sending you all much love, and I'll see you soon. Bye!